Thank you once again, Ida Person, for granting the interview. As the head of the post-TRRC unit is a very busy unit. And also, as you are the head, the special advisor to the minister, to the Attorney General and Minister of Justice. These are throwback questions that we held a couple of, I think, 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago. First, to start with, you can explain the rationale behind the establishment of the post-TRRC unit. And also, you can delve into the SAM mechanism because the mechanism is the hallmark of the entire post-TRRC unit, the establishment of the SAM mechanism, because that is where you will see the appointment of the special prosecutor and other divisions for the implementations of the TRRC recommendation. So you can delve into the importance of it and why the rationale of the establishment of the post-TRRC unit.
Thank you, Mr. Saidi Khan. Thank you for the partnership with the Gambia Press Union and with journalists such as yourself. As you rightfully said, the post-TRRC, well, you said the post-TRRC unit is a big unit. We're a small unit, but definitely the work that we are asked to do is a big one. So this unit was set up by the government of the Gambia in the implementation plan on the TRRC report. As you're aware, in 2017, the government of the Gambia embarked on a very holistic transitional justice program. So transitional justice is an attempt by countries to look back at gross human rights violations that took place and apply a multi-sectoral lens to that. So to investigate, why those human rights violations took place, so a truth-seeking process, but then also to rectify through reparations for victims, prosecutions or other forms of justice and accountability measures for those that bear the greatest responsibilities, but then a series of reforms, whether legislative or institutional, just to ensure guarantees of non-recurrence. And on guarantees of non-recurrence, I mean, it could really be a list of other things that are done. So in the Gambia, we embarked on a very holistic one, where we activated all those pillars of transitional justice at the same time. You would recall that whilst the TRRC was ongoing, the Human Rights Commission was being set up as a permanent institution to prevent future rights violations. So that's a guarantee of non-recurrence. We've had security sector reforms that also commenced the same time, a constitutional reform. The judiciary started to also reform. Some legislation started to be reviewed, some were introduced and so on. So that was the pre-TRRC and during the TRRC process. And essentially the Truth Commission, and I always use platforms to thank the Truth Commission, the commissioners, the directors, the staff for the incredible work that they did. We've had 57 Truth Commissions in the past, and it's true we've had a lot of lessons learned to pick up from, but the Gambian Truth Commission definitely also contributed to this basket of best practices, making it one of the most participatory, inclusive, accessible Truth Commissions the world has ever seen, and continues to be a center of study. They left us, the Gambian people, the government of the Gambia, with recommendations, because it's a commission and all they can do is recommend. So 265 were made, of which the government in its white paper in May 2022 responded to accept to implement all the recommendations, except for 2. So 263 recommendations are now being implemented. But to implement that, to really go from narrative to action, an implementation plan was developed and published in May 2023. And it's in that plan that the structure and the process of implementing the TRRC recommendations is spelled out. And the post-TRRC unit is mentioned there as a promise to ensure coordination of the implementation process, but also to support with communication, enhancing transparency. And that's why us interfacing like this is so important, as well as to support mobilization of resources. They're all connected, right? You coordinate, you communicate, and you also mobilize resources, whether those resources are financial, but also other types of resources, political resources. We need people to believe and to support politically this implementation process. Sometimes technical assistance, there's some specialized areas of implementation. We really need to have partnerships for technical assistance. So that's the role of the unit. I'm sorry it was a bit long-winded on how I got there, but I thought it was important to just set the background, yeah, exactly, as to where we're coming from, where the unit is birthed from a process that took place from 2017 to 2022. Yeah. And I remember, yes, exactly. So the purpose of transitional justice, it was born out of a study of restorative justice processes, right? As people, we've always felt like retributive justice on its own may not be enough. It may not be enough to just see perpetrators, criminals put away. Questions started to arise as to, but what about victims and what happened to them? What are we doing for them as a society? Questions started to arise about, well, in so much as this person, an individual, was wrong, what about the institution that they represented? Should we look at that institution, right? So whilst there continues to be such an emphasis and a fascination on prosecutions, I just wanted to say that what we're doing in the Gambia is much more than that, right? It's a central component, I agree. It's a very attractive component to discuss, but it's not enough. Recognition of it not being enough, that's why efforts on reparations in particular are a super priority for the government. The victims enjoy the reparations they receive during their lifetime. And then that's also why we've embarked on a security sector reform process, albeit slow in the opinion of some. The realization is that we must look at how our security apparatus is designed and whether it's really still fit for purpose. So those conversations and those efforts are equally important. But to come back to prosecutions, yes, the TRRC identified about 69 individuals and said that they believe they have committed crimes. Some may even have committed international crimes, enforced disappearance, torture, and crimes against humanity. And they recommended for the government to prosecute them. Some were equally recommended to be banned from ever holding public office. And like I said, the government has responded. We've responded to accept those recommendations. All the recommendations around prosecutions have been accepted. Some of the recommendations around banning people, a few of them in 4 instances, the government has noted and said they'll look further into it because those people had apparently presented some potentially exculpatory, information. But notwithstanding, that's the process that we're in right now, to both ensure that the bans take place, firstly by introducing a law that allows that, and now working with the relevant institutions to effect the bans. But then secondly, to set up, as you rightfully said, the special accountability mechanism. We call it SAM. Now, a lot of people do ask, well, if Germany is prosecuting and the US has prosecuted, then why don't you just prosecute? If we are seeing prosecutions every day in the Gambia, in our high courts, why don't you just prosecute? This is a policy decision. Considering that we've had a truth commission that was publicly available, continues to be publicly available, these cases are special. Put it that way. They're very sensitive. Not only the public, and by the public, all the institutions are in some way a part of the public. We all watch TV, have formed their opinions. And that is not an ideal situation for prosecutions to take place. So one really must be very careful about how you ensure that the standards of prosecution are very, very high to guarantee the fairness and the legitimacy of the process. Otherwise, it may turn into a witch hunt. So I'll say, for example, that an individual that came before the TRRC and confessed to committing a crime before the TRRC, a truth commission, has all the right in our law to come before a court and plead not guilty and say to the state, you prove your case, right? And that already is a very strange situation for everyone involved, certainly the public. So those are some of the considerations as to why we should try to insulate and protect these processes, these prosecutions. But there are others as well. Just legally speaking, some of the crimes that the TRRC is discussing were not crimes in the Gambia. So we don't have a crime of enforced disappearance. How are you going to charge somebody with that if it's not in our law books? Similarly for torture, we take note it's customary law, but still, what will be the charge sheet? And then we have crimes against humanity. So there was this legislative gap that we also had that made the government think, okay, this is going to be an unusual situation on how we prosecute those crimes. And you know, the difficulty, or rather the threat or risk, if you decide to just prosecute murder, kidnapping, grievous bodily harm, those crimes we actually did have in our law books, but then you leave torture, enforced disappearance, crimes against humanity. That's also, you know, that's not really justice, right? It means you go for the low-level perpetrators and you let go the more serious offenses. So that's also not a situation that you want to be in. So all in all, looking at that, the Gambia Bar Association is one of the first association in the Gambia, rightfully so, that approached the government in 2019, even whilst the TRRC proceedings were going on, to say, hey, we think we're going to need to create something special, different for the Gambia. Let's look at our circumstances. Let's look at what the TRRC is unraveling. Let's learn from other places that have been in similar situations, and let's design something. So the SAM came into design in that way. What is the SAM? The SAM it's like a triangle, I always say. I think this is the shape of a triangle, okay? So it has three corners, three offices or mechanisms. The SAM basically says we need to ensure that investigations and prosecutions are taking place in one office. So in our current system, our domestic system is the police of the Gambia that investigates and submits the files to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP's office, and they prosecute. But best practice shows that when those that are investigating are those that are prosecuting and they're under one office, that insulates, that protects the investigatorial process. So every single international tribunal works in this way. It's typically called the Office of the Prosecutor, OTP, but in the case of the Gambia, it's called the Special Prosecutor's Office. And that's one component of the SAM. They will receive the TRRC documents, material, recommendations, and they will investigate. The investigators will be hired by the special prosecutor, go through a thorough vetting process. We expect many of the investigators to be Gambians, definitely. We expect, in fact, the whole SAM to be very Gambian, but there will be also some internationals that come in to strengthen the capacity. Now, once an investigation has been completed and a case prepared, another thing the SAM allows for is for the special prosecutor who heads the special prosecutor's office to be able to activate cases in two forums, two types of courts. If they feel this is a purely domestic, crime, murder, a simple murder, then High Court of the Gambia. And when it comes to the High Court of the Gambia, which is the second component of the SAM, the Chief Justice, using his constitutional powers, has created a special criminal division of the High Court of the Gambia to be able to focus and hear the TRC cases, because His lordship is expecting the volume of cases to come to the High Court to be high, but even his lordship is aware of the sensitivity and the special nature of these cases. It's not a typical case that you want to just stay in the courts for years on end. So it's also a policy decision of the judiciary to say we will match the effort of the executive. As you have recognized that these are cases that are very important to the Gambian population, we will equally ensure that there's a dedicated division. And there are 3 or 4 judges, but I believe 3, that have been assigned to the Special Criminal Division. And in fact, they have already started working this division. They're looking at other crimes whilst waiting for the TRC crimes to start being filed in. We expect really the majority of the cases to go to the High Court of the Gambia. But there may be instances where the special prosecutor thinks, no, this is an international crime. This is clearly enforced disappearance. This is clearly torture. This is clearly crimes against humanity. And therefore, the special tribunal is the 3rd component of the SAM. It's an internationalized, a hybrid court, which mixes both Gambian and international law. And that is really an endeavor, a milestone that I think the Gambia should celebrate for achieving. It required a lot of political work. The government of the Gambia approached ECOWAS as of 2022, and between 2022 and 2024, the heads of state approved this decision to establish the special tribunal. We can discuss why ECOWAS, we can discuss why an international tribunal, but I think for the purpose of I will stop here to say that's the SAM, Special Prosecutor's Office, which the ability to triage the cases to domestic and international, so activating all avenues of justice. And we haven't seen that anywhere else. In most places, they go only for international, and then the domestic cases are an afterthought, right? And this is Rwanda, Sierra Leone. Gambia is the first country that's saying, no, we can do domestic cases as we're doing international cases as well.
Thank you. In your implementation plan, 5-year implementation plan, is the Gambia looking at the other countries' implementation plan, like Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and other international communities, to internalize their implementation process to the Gambia's implementation plan, or is it a different approach, implementation plan of the Gambia? Yeah.
It's a very different approach. It's a very, very different approach. So in 2017, whilst the Gambia architecture to transitional justice was being designed, we had the foresight that Rwanda and Sierra Leone and Kosovo and Tunisia and Ghana did not have on transitional justice in South Africa. So in fact, the way our transitional justice program started was through learning. That whole year of 2017 was about learning. The Ministry of Justice headed study tours to Sierra Leone, to South Africa, but also invited experts from everywhere. I mean, they offered themselves, in fact, to come and to say these were the lessons learned. So we knew from the onset that there would be a TRRC. In fact, that's why our TRRC was a TRRC, having learned from South Africa that reparations doesn't have to wait. And South Africa is now commemorating 30 years since their Truth Commission, and the 20,000 victims that they listed are still saying there are many other victims, and not just that, but that they haven't actually received reparations. They've received some compensation, but reparations goes more than compensation. It's about rehabilitation, it's about restitution, it's about acknowledgement and other forms of satisfaction, you know? So having learned from South Africa and how important this issue of reparations is to victims, and how if you don't do it, it risks undermining all your efforts, we ensured that our Truth Commission had that extra R. So it was a commission that was given the mandate to give interim reparations whilst its proceedings were going on, right? So on prosecutions as well, certainly, I just said that, well, the contexts are also very, very different. You cannot compare a genocide that happened against the Tutsis in Rwanda to 22 years of autocratic rule in the Gambia. You just cannot. You cannot. We're talking about 800,000 to 1 million people slaughtered. And our Truth Commission said in the Gambia, it's about 250 people, sorry. Again, it's also not about numbers. It's about the terror and the destruction that these crimes caused, you know. So Rwanda was a reconstruction from the ground, and it required the international community coming in very, very strongly. So in Rwanda, there was a huge emphasis on getting the people at the top, and that's why the UN Security Council established the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. And by the time it took the Rwandan state to get back up, that's when, you know, 15 years later, that you started seeing domestic attempts at prosecutions. And when they realized the sheer volume of prosecutions they had to do, I mean, we're talking about 69 individuals, they're talking about tens of thousands of individuals, they then invoked their own traditional justice mechanisms, the gacaca courts. The gacaca courts were done at community level, and in many instances, the sentences for confessing in a gacaca court is community service. So every context is very different, but we did take a lot of time. Then in 2017, in terms of envisaging what the next 10 years of transitional justice will look like for the Gambia, but even continually now in designing the SAM, lots and lots of lessons learned, especially when it comes to costing. When it comes to costing prosecutions, there have been a lot of lessons learned from the international tribunals. So when we say that we anticipate the special tribunal and the international prosecutions to cost about $60 million for the Gambia, for a process that takes 5 years and involves up to 10 very high-level perpetrators, I know 60 million is a lot of money. It is a lot of money, especially in this day and age. And especially on anything where you're going to require some donor assistance. I'm aware that there's so many changes to development finance that have happened over the past 2 years. But still, when it came to costing that 60 million, we had a lot of lessons learned on how to reduce costs. So judges would not be hired immediately. They would be put into a roster, not hired, but put into a roster. When they are required, their services activated, only paid for the period of time they actually sit. You know, so there have been many, many instances where we have reduced the cost. And again, thanks to, I'd say, the approach that we've had of always wanting to learn from others, always making space on the table for people to come and say, you know, this and this and this and this is what we have learned in these situations. So, and I think that's an approach that we would want to really recommend to other countries, you know, to use this partnership approach, not just say that this is a state and a government-led process. No, civil society, the victims, the international community, even individual experts that are offering their services, really important to listen to everybody and design something jointly, co-create, as we say.
Okay. What are your current challenges faced by the post-TRRC? Chief among which is the funding, the USAID funding. Though globally, it has affected many funding institutions that are doing much of the government work, but how adversely are you affected, and what are the current challenges by the post-TRRC?
Yeah. Yes, it is true. If you want to boil it down and reduce it, this has always been their biggest challenge to transitional justice in the Gambia and anywhere else as well. I explained that transitional justice programs are not the only program. They're not the focus necessarily. They are a parallel program to the national development agenda. So you already have a national development agenda where, as a people, you're trying to fund education, health, your trading, you know, the day-to-day functioning of of the country. And then in addition to that, there's a transitional justice program that says, let's ensure that we learn from the past and put ourselves in a good governance and human rights trajectory. So it's an added load. Funding will always be a challenge. I think the special thing about the Gambia is the level of political will that has been sustained throughout the years, because in some places we do see that political will dwindling so much that the processes just stall. And we're not stalling in the Gambia. If you want to say that things have slowed down to some degree, we can discuss, and I probably agree in one or two or three instances, but it's not a regression and it's not a stop. There's a lot of effort to still keep moving forward. Funding ultimately also boils down to partnerships, and I think that's the discussion that we aren't having enough of, which is how are our partnerships changing what we value in one another. So this is still evolving. I don't think the dust has settled yet fully, but definitely the way in which countries are interacting with each other, what they're finding valuable in one another, and the reason why their partnerships were forged in the first place is being questioned at the moment. The dust will settle. New partnerships will be formed. We will realign, right? So it's also exciting to have a look at partners that perhaps haven't been traditional when it comes to transitional justice or human rights issues, now maybe seeing some changes in their position, So it's still ongoing. Like I said, the dust hasn't settled. This eruption really started about a year and a half ago. But what is important is that as a government, we continuously are engaging with our traditional partners, certainly, but also opening the doors for possibility for new partnerships. And also, I think we need to do with what we have actually available, On international prosecutions, that's tough. Because what you need, the bare minimum you need to just start is already quite a lot. And so we've been advised by experts that we need about 60% of the anticipated budget to really start on international prosecutions. And the thing about international prosecutions is that they involve possibly extradition. The detention centers have to really be of quality. There has to be witness protection services, so the services that are absolutely required in that process are just very cost intensive. However, on domestic prosecutions, we don't require that. Do we have a witness protection program in the Gambia today? We're starting, there's policies, there's efforts, but what I'm saying is that it isn't a requirement of our justice system, right? So let us start. That has been the approach. That's the focus of the government. When you're committed on doing something, you got to start with what you have. And I think we've realized that what we have to start with is our domestic prosecutions. Let us start. Let's get the special prosecutor investigating and pushing the cases to the High Court, seeing our prosecution, seeing our prosecutors, investigators, our judges, really now attending to the work of the post-TRC, especially after all the legislative issues have been dealt with.
Okay, good. Let me come to the media now, the media aspect. Now, the work of journalists in transitional justice participation is crucial to inform and educate the public to take part of the process. We've seen the recent engagement with your unit to the GPU to train journalists on covering special trials and universal, trials jurisdiction. How important are these to the work of journalists to be equipped with the requisite knowledge and skills to take part and inform the public with accuracy of the whole transitional justice process? How important are these to the work?
It couldn't be overemphasized. I started by thanking you, Mr. Saidi Khan, and President Isatou Keita as well, and the whole GPU apparatus for the partnership that we have, the collaboration that we have as a post-TRC unit and the GPU. you know yourself, journalists, nation builders, peace engines, or conflict drivers. You are essential to absolutely every single aspect of nation building, absolutely every single aspect, and particularly those aspects that are sensitive, politically sensitive or technically very sensitive, socially very sensitive. Then you take on this even bigger role of, when I say peace drivers, you really do, which is to understand the gravitas of what the assignment is, and ensure that everybody in society, whether from civil society, whether from government, whether from any arm, the legislator is navigating it, you know? So I think, firstly, just appreciating the promise of transitional justice is something that journalists, I'm seeing more and more in the Gambia doing. I came back home to work on transitional justice in June 2017 first, and then back in 18. And the first training that we had was on journalists accompanying the Truth Commission. And to now see those same journalists in the room, about 24 of them, still accompanying the process is exactly what we need, because it's not a simple process. And we understand that your business model and the world that journalists are working in and are fighting back on is a very suffocating one, where you're forced to be sometimes sensational, for the likes, you know, and so on. And this is, I keep on saying, not an issue. Transitional justice, building a nation, is not a TikTok and click like kind of issue. So the severity and the maturity that is required to really accompany the process, we see more and more journalists are appreciating, and really building and bridging the gap between these processes and how eclectic and theoretical they are, down to, you know, the everyday lives of people. That translation, nobody is doing it better than journalists. There's always areas to improve. As a government, certainly we need to do more in providing more information, in communicating more. I think all of government will accept that they can do better in communicating. It boils down to, again, resources. Communication is actually very capital intensive, but it also boils down to a change somewhat of mindsets. You have to understand, we are coming from a period where communication was not on the agenda, right? So there is still that work to be done. And of course, with journalists as well, there is still the work that you have to do to, like I said, accompany this very heavy, difficult process, and try not to sensationalize it, or you know, turn it into an entertainment spectacle, because that's not what it is. Yeah. But really, very impressed by the quality and quantity, the volume of discussion that is going on around transitional justice, especially as we're moving to an even more sensitive part of it, which is the prosecutions. The TRRC was very sensitive, certainly, but prosecutions is also equally very sensitive. And it's great to see how all of the journalists are really ready to now move into that and make sure that accurate information and the analysis of it, the synthesis of why this is important, is trickling down to the everyday Gambian.
Good. And then on one final one, next month on the 9th, your unit will embark on its maiden CSO media platform meeting on X Space. So you can delve into it, why this is so important now and timely for your unit to engage the media and the CSO on X Space to discuss the implementation updates of the TRRC.
What is new is that we're doing it on X. But in the implementation plan since May 2023, just as that plan says to the Gambian people that we're establishing the post-TRC unit, whose full name, by the way, of this unit is Secretariat to the Steering Committee on the Implementation of the TRC Recommendations. So it's a very long name, and that's why we just say we're the post-TRC unit, but we're a Secretariat to the Steering Committee on the Implementation. But the plan also says that 4 platforms will be managed by the post-TRRC unit. The post-TRRC unit will ensure that there is a steering committee that is meeting, and they do meet at least twice a year. The steering committee comprises of permanent secretaries or deputy permanent secretaries in all the 18 ministries that are involved in implementation. And it also includes the Gambia Bar Association, Tango, and AVLO, which is the Alliance of Victim-Led Organizations. Besides that platform, the PTU, we also have to manage the partnership platforms, which is a platform for our partners to also engage with the government on how implementation is going and co-create and mobilize resources together. Then there is the victim town halls. We manage town halls, small town halls that go into victim communities where the victims can directly interface with the government officials that are implementing. So we've had one, for example, in Kanifing with the medical board, the doctors that are treating them. We've had one in Janjanbureh with the ECOWAS Gambia committee that was drafting the statute because they were interested in prosecutions. We've had one as well in Jambur with the security. People from SIS, the police, the Office of National Security went to Jambur. So we've been having these victim town halls as well. And then the final platform that we have to be holding, which we have been hosting every 2 or 3 months or so for the past 2 years, but we've been doing it in Tango, and now we're transforming it to do it on an X space to attract even more people, because we take note that physically coming to Tango could have been a chore, and maybe it was the reason why on average we'd have about 30 attendants. But we're also doing that because of funding, right? Because the funding is dwindling as a post-TRRC unit, we've had to redesign our activities. What's important is the information and the interaction is happening. Whether that information or interaction is happening in a room or it's happening on cyberspace, it just needs to happen. So the CSO and media platform meetings, they have been happening every 2 or 3 months, but on the 9th of March, we're doing it. We are now telling Gambia that this is going to be happening on Twitter Space, like a radio show. Please tune in. And we have 28 media houses, at least, that are on our mailing list. And we have 28 civil society organizations, and 31 media houses that have received the invitation. So we're really hoping that everybody finds the hour to tune in, where I will give the latest updates, and it will be a question. It's basically an online press, press briefing style conversation.
Likewise.
Yeah, exactly. So looking forward to continuing to have these every 2 or 3 months. Just in an effort to, keep the conversation going, but to clarify issues as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be part of that Twitter space.
Oh, for sure. We look forward to having you. You better be a part of it. Yeah.
I have to be. So on a nutshell, you can share your final keynote conclusion to this interview.
Yeah, I'm delighted every time I'm stopped or every time I'm engaged about the work that post-TRRC is doing. It's great to know that people still understand and appreciate the importance of transitional justice. It's just a fact that if you do not deal with issues of the past, they will continue to creep up if we do not repair individuals whose dignity, whose rights were stripped away from them. It does fester, their children grow up with that trauma, their communities remain traumatized, etc., etc. So I'm always grateful for the opportunity to continue to discuss these issues because, look, repairing is a long-term process. We have to accept something about what we have embarked upon as Gambians, which is that may we live to see reparations start and finish. May we live to see prosecutions start and finish. But there's so many other things that the TRRC has unveiled about our community and us as a people that is going to take a generation of work. And so we have this duty of passing on this work to the next generation to continue that work as well, right? And until it's really completed, can we say that the Gambia is a more peaceful, a more stable country that is really and truly ready for development? Because we know the foundation of development is peace. You cannot develop anything if you are in tatters, if you're not united as a people. So that is ultimately the ambition. It's a difficult one, Saidi Khan, when you're working on an issue where you know that you will not live to see the real end result. But that is what nation building is. We're all doing our part to pass on the baton. So thank you for appreciating this good work, for contributing, for being frontliners in it. I speak now to the journalists to say that you are absolutely exceptional, and irrespective of the challenges that we all face, and you in particular, just keep at it. This will reap dividends, but only if we keep at it.
Thank you so much. Finally, thank you.
Thank you too. All right, I'm wishing you a very good day, and I will see you around. See you at least on Twitter. Ramadan Mubarak. And Ramadan Mubarak to you and your family. Okay.
To you and your family as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. You can share.
Yeah.
Yeah.